It's hard to believe, but we are at the end of 2022. So that means it is time for our 2023 astrological predictions. As promised a few weeks ago with Bryan Scarborough, or Fixed Air Moon as he is frequently known. So, Bryan, thank you so much for joining me to do this. I know that people loved our video about the last 7 weeks of 2022, talking about all the big alignments, conjunctions, and everything else that has been going on in this last part of 2022. And it's time to delve into 2023.
Well, hello and thank you. I'm happy to be back and I'm glad that we get to do this. So this is always going to be fun and I've definitely been looking forward to it. And I'm happy that that last video was well received, of course. So hopefully this one is too. And people are happy to hear my opinion on the planets and how they affect us here. 2023 is a big year. There's a lot of big energy, not only moving, changing energy, but kind of going back and forth. There's some powerful stuff. So it's gonna be interesting to break it down with you all.
I've looked at a lot of charts. I've watched a lot of videos in prepping for this, and I know you've got charts to share with us, which is something we haven't done, as in you and I haven't done together before. So this is really exciting. But I wanted to start with some of the sort of broader themes before we start breaking down the individual placements and things that we have going on. So we are starting the year with three planets retrograde. We've got Mars, Mercury, and Uranus. So how is that going to feel as we begin the year with three planets retrograde?
Um, I mean it's interesting, of course. I think the Mars and Mercury one is much more felt than the Uranus one. And Uranus is stationing as we start the year, and it's really just kind of stopped here at 15 and then coming just a tick below that to 1456, 14 degree 56 minutes about before it stations direct. But it is the Mars retrograde in Gemini that is starting to slow down and get ready for its station on January 12th. But having that kick off the year with the Mercury retrograde in Capricorn, of course, because this Mercury is the dispositor of that Mars in Gemini, uh, it's gonna be a heavy Mercury retrograde feel to kick off the year. And that's where I think a lot of this year kind of kicks off and where so many things are kind of shifting and going into a further place that there's almost like a built-in hesitancy, especially with Mars retrograde. It's much more hesitant than a Mars that is moving forward. Mars retrogrades every 2 years. It's the planet that retrogrades the least frequent out of all. So it's it's an interesting one, but I think that it's important too because it's also one of those years where we want to make the biggest leaps ever, and there's going to be almost this big need to do so. But it is time, it is patience, it is persistence. There's things that just have to be really understood from a subjective place, from an inner place, and then there's the forward action from there. And I think that that's a big theme as well this year is understanding your point of view powerfully and acting upon that. And it's definitely not a year to just follow any smoke in the distance. It's, really about burning our own fire and kind of blazing with that and what that trail is going to look like. So it is interesting having those two planets retrograde, especially with a Mars in Gemini. Um, we can think ourselves to death in some ways, but there's also an inner sort of truth and knowing and just being, adaptable and paying attention to your surroundings because that's going to be the most important thing is what is your surroundings and are they fitting long term? Are they going to be part of the destiny? Because there's so much smoke and mirrors that we're going to see elsewhere that it does kind of continue that theme of what's your life like subjectively. That is the key. That's the focus. So there's definitely a lot. I definitely would say there's a lot that we're going to see on a public scale, especially in politics, especially within just structures of our society, what the rule makers, the laws. We're going to see some heavy stuff come out, and that can trip people out, that can make people question their own self. But as long as you're finding the truth of your environment and your personal stuff, it won't be so hard. And it is going to be coming into the year of the rabbit in Chinese astrology, which I think is fascinating because the rabbits are, they're gentle, kind, loving creatures. They're little bunnies, right? Oh, so cute. But, we forget how like tactful rabbits are too, and how alert they are. So it's definitely one of those years where, yeah, like find the beauty in life, find your situation where you can, have compassion, be gentle. But man, when we also have to be alert and on notice in our, lives where we're at so that we can react quickly. And that's one of the best things about a rabbit is their reaction time is boom. And I would say that that's something that this Mars retrograde in Aries is helping everybody with. And also starting it off with a Mercury retrograde at the same time. It might feel like, how do we be tactful right now or quick as we start, but as we get going, there's an awareness that is creeping in that I think is potent too.
Just before we move on to the next thing, because you were talking about the year of the rabbit, it made me think about some numerology that I was looking at earlier. And we're moving into a 7-year globally. And I know enough about numerology in regard to myself in terms of on a global scale, not so much. So I'm going to attribute some of this to what I've been through. But how much do you know about astrology? Astrology. You know a lot about astrology. How much do you know about numerology?
A decent. It's not my primary
Mm.
focus. I know a little bit. I am a 7 life
Oh,
path,
okay.
so that's an
So
interesting one.
when I'm in a 7-year, my last 2 7 years, and I don't know prior to that, I haven't sort of done the calculations, but I know the last few 7 years that I've had have been quite destructive in terms of it has ripped things out of my life that I wasn't personally ready to let go of. And I found it almost traumatic. But yet, the second half of each of my 7 years were magical because when I released what the universe was trying to take from me, what I found on the other side of that was incredible. And it propelled me forward in a way that I wanted to move. I just wanted the journey to be easier. So when I
Hmm.
hear that we're globally moving into a 7-year, that's what I think about.
Hmm. Yeah,
Does
7.
the astrology match with that sort of
Yeah, I would
take
say
on it?
so. Seven's very Neptunian energy. It's very spiritual, but there's also a very intellectual side to 7 too. So it's very intellectual, it's spiritual. There is surrender that comes with Neptune. There is, you know, not trying to have total control. And I would say the way this year's set up astrologically, there isn't a whole lot of control at all. It's a very fated year. And I say that because it's Pluto square the nodes. So, these nodes are very big points in transit that do kind of link to where we should be heading, where we, the opposite spectrum of where we probably want to not focus every bit of our energy into. And square Pluto is like it's a big evolution point for the collective in terms of a lot of our contracts and commitments. And gosh, it reminds me of just in this moment, like I'm sitting here, it's like you have like a contract and it gets stamped like void, like contract void. So we're seeing where there's going to be a lot of voided contracts in what we thought was a forever deal. You know what I'm saying? If that makes
Mm-hmm.
sense, which is going towards Aries North Node, which we will see that ingress this year with Pluto at 29 degrees exact. Intense stuff. I think that it is about being a trailblazer, being able to identify with what your destiny is, because the destiny you might have thought it was or even up to this point, and we've seen so much change already over the past 5 years even, is about to take like a big sort of evolutionary leap. And we have to be able to not just be passive, we have to be tactful, right? Like I mentioned with the rabbit,
Mhm.
and assertive. So it's going to be the assertive nature of defining what contracts you're going to abide by, be it just personal ones that we set for ourselves, or be it something bigger that comes from powers outside of our control.
2023 is there's a lot of earth and water energy. Do I have that correct?
Yeah, yeah. Saturn's coming into Pisces, Uranus in Taurus, Jupiter in Taurus. Jupiter's going to really spend half the year in Aries and half the year in Taurus. It's going to jet through Aries and hang out in Taurus and come to 15 degrees in retrograde, and it's going to be locked in there. So where we saw over the last year, Jupiter, and even the year prior, Jupiter ingress into Aquarius, or into Pisces, back into Aquarius, Jupiter coming into Aries, back into Pisces. This one is a different ingress that we're seeing because it is just Jupiter coming into Taurus, and it's locked and loaded until it leaves. So there is a lot of earth, there is a lot of water, but I do think that that air quality gets brought up immensely with Pluto coming into Aquarius, even though we will see the degress back into Capricorn over the next couple years. But yeah, I would say you're definitely right, but there is an air quality to it that I think is substantial too, and also with the nodes shifting from Taurus, North Node Taurus to North Node Aries, South Node Scorpio to South Node Libra. We are seeing a mix, if you will, of fire and air getting thrown in. It's kind of a big, it really does kind of encompass all the elements in a lot of ways. But yeah, I would say you're right. Primary focus would be water and earth, which is very feminine, right?
Mm. So the themes that kept coming up in all of the videos that I watched, and I'm curious as to whether, and you've kind of touched on this a little bit, but I'm curious if your take on the astrology is the same, that the major themes of this year will be military, freedom, democracy, and the financial markets.
Yeah. I think that institutions up and down the board, whether financial, medical, government, big emphasis as Pluto's rubbing this knot of Capricorn Aquarius, getting ready to try and find liberation when all's said and done in Aquarius, and kind of make things, transform things to back to where it is fair for everybody. And there are win-wins, and it kind of puts us all on a sort of equal playing field instead of these big tiers that are, in place right now. So yeah, any institution, very interesting to watch. We're going to see some fall, we're going to see some come out of nowhere, but I think the ones that we see really do well will be ones that are really looking out for everybody and not kind of picking a side or putting their own interest, sort of first. Like we're going to see, whether it's financial, government, whatever we're looking at here, whatever's being the most fair to the people is probably going to do the best long term, where you're going to see really which ones are taking advantage. Um, and then what was one of the other ones? I jumped into institutions. Can you
So there
repeat?
was military, financial,
Yeah.
uh, freedom, and democracy.
Yeah. Yeah. I think democracy goes kind of with the government institution
Mm.
realm that I was talking about. I do think there's, of course, a fight for that. We are in the Pluto return stages here still for the United States. We haven't even seen the third one from a geo point of view as of yet. We're getting there. North Node Aries definitely has, a militant energy to it, and it might be necessary. Um, I don't think anybody wants war. I think we do want peace. I think there might be ways to pioneer this new way forward without it, but we're coming up on so many transits that are like saying war is approaching. And I know that a lot of astrologers have talked about this. I may have mentioned it on our last episode, but just the ingresses from Pluto into Aquarius, Neptune into Aries, and Uranus into Gemini, which is all coming in the next 3 years. that they all led to three of the biggest wars in at least American history, but also, we're talking about world history here as well with, World War II. So, gosh, I would love to say that it's not a possibility, but it sure does look like an absolute possibility. And I think that even just saying that as a prediction is kind of low hanging fruit.
Mm.
But I will say too, with Pluto and Aquarius, Aquarius is so unpredictable that just because Pluto kind of was taking place in a revolutionary war last time it was coming into Aquarius, that timeline's already kind of played out. So I don't know, because Uranus is so unpredictable, Aquarius is so unpredictable. It's almost like too much of us are thinking that that's coming, that it's very possible that the revolution's different. You know what I'm saying? It very good possibility, but I wouldn't be shocked if we were all duped and somehow we innovated a different way to sort of find liberation and freedom, um, and get out of these structures that are manipulative or oppressive in our lives.
I just wanted to say two things before we move on. I think when we talk about war, a lot of us always have a vision of how it will look, and we base that on the history that we know and the visions that we've seen. And I think often things, every time they come back around, even if it's a similar cycle and even if it is a war of some sort, it will look different to the wars that we know from our past, because there's been so much evolution in life and technology. And I think that's where things can shift and not appear the same.
I love that you said that, because that's a great way to put it. And I was thinking as you started talking, like, you know what? We're kind of in a war right now. Like there is a war going on, but it's not being fought like any other war we've ever seen before. So a lot of us are like, there's no war. When's the war? Right?
Right? We're waiting for the
When's the
planes
war
to fly
start?
over
And
and the
sure, there's
bombs to
always some
drop.
war going on this
Mm,
planet, right?
yes.
But as far as like the big one, maybe we're already in that right now. And maybe use your own awareness to figure out what that might be about.
So the other thing that I wanted to touch on before we move on to the next thing is, a lot of people are saying we're already in the age of Aquarius, but I know that David Palmer, the Leo King, who we both work with, he has sort of said we're not quite in the age of Aquarius yet. We're kind of stepping through the doorway of it. And I do know from a lot of conversations that people think of the age of Aquarius as a very romantic time. And, we think of the song Age of Aquarius and it's all hippie and love and all of that. But I don't think people necessarily realize that to get to that place of peace, love, light, and everything that comes with it, we actually have to break down the structures that are in place that are restricting everybody. And that's a horrible process.
It is. And you know what? For fun, because I don't know if people know this, but it makes sense to show it.
Mm,
So maybe I'll just share it real quick.
great.
All right. So this is March 21st, which is the spring equinox. So it is the beginning of, in a tropical sense, the zodiac. You do the ages with a sidereal zodiac, and it's where the sun's at. So we're seeing the sun at 6 degrees Pisces. This is coming up in March of 2023. This will be the sidereal planets for March of 2023. So to put this into perspective, years, and I'm just going to make this easy and jump, 100 years.
Mhm.
Is if we come to 2123, we see that the sun is still at 5 degrees of Pisces. These are the ages. So we have to go a long way until we start to see the change here. Oh, which will be,
So we're not going to see the full age of Aquarius till The 2500s?
Yeah.
Wow.
So we're still on this cusp, like we're getting very close, but exactly, 2500.
So we're doing the work for the generations to come to live in their peace, love, and light.
That's exactly true. Like this is the work, and it's kind of closing out the age of Pisces, which is such a spiritual age. And it kind of started with Jesus in a way in that story, and how
Hmm.
like really it is like BC, the birth of Christ, started in the age of Pisces. If you look at the map of the sine wave, it was exactly that. Um, that started that ingress into Pisces. So we're kind of finishing that work. And a lot of it is like, of course, like, you see so much of the star seed stuff, all of this, these spiritual terms that get thrown around. There's something to it. And it's getting more intense and getting ready to really make that shift fully. But yeah, not quite there yet.
It's always fun being the trailblazer. It's just, and in history, the trailblazers always look amazing, but it takes away, I think sometimes when there's a retelling of the story, just how hard it can be for everybody sort of moving through all these shifts. And it can. There are times where over the last few years, the world has just felt overwhelming. And I know I've said it before. I know that a lot of people that watch High Vibe have said it, that we all just want to break, even if it's for a day, just to be able to enjoy things, to then pick up the gauntlet and keep sort of moving through everything that we're dealing with. So, this year in 2023, there is a lot of movement in the outer planets in terms
Hmm.
of the charts. And I know that the outer planets are always moving, but this is a big year in terms of a lot of them are moving houses. And that's not normal, is it?
No, if you think about it, Jupiter will change signs every year.
Mm-hmm.
Saturn's every 2.5 years. Pluto ranges depending on the sign, but we're seeing, stays of 18 years, 20 years in Aquarius. Neptune is 12 years. Uranus is 8 years. So yeah, and we're not seeing Neptune and Uranus ingress just yet, but still seeing Pluto, which was 18 years or 16 years in Capricorn. And then we're seeing Saturn, which is 2.5 years. And then we're seeing Jupiter, which is every year, kind of all happen at the same time in one year. Yeah, absolutely. That's a big deal. It these are Jupiter and Saturn are the two biggest planets. They are big energy. They're a big deal. They definitely bring a lot to the table here. And Pluto is the smallest planet, but nobody who follows astrology can discount the immense, intense power that Pluto packs. So, yeah, it's just, I mean, these are three huge energetic bodies shifting. It's not just like your Mercury, or your Mars or Venus. It is the outer ones, and Neptune and Uranus are not far behind. Like they're getting ready 2024, 2025 to start kind of playing their game with ingresses too. So
And for people that are watching this that don't necessarily understand all the astrology at sort of great depths, the inner planets are the personal planets which affect us directly, whereas the outer planets are the ones that affect the community. So this is
mhm.
more about these changes that we're going to see on a global scale.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they do affect us personally, but they are more outside, like outer planets. There's more outside effect that you have to adapt to, where the personal planets can definitely be much more personal with things, aspects in life that can show up for good or bad or in between. Same with the outer planets. Everybody will be affected slightly differently. It's not that everybody is going to go through the exact same sort of process this year. But I mean, there's an underlying current that I think we'll all have to look at objectively and be able to. It is going to be the great test of how well we can innovate.
So let's start breaking down some of these transits. And I know you've got your charts. I've got a list of transits that I wanted to talk about. So I figure we'll do it in chronological order and you can jump in with whatever you've got that I haven't covered. But so we've already touched on this. January, we see Mars, Mercury, and Uranus go direct. Once the three of them are direct, will the energy lighten at least a little bit for us from how it'll feel as the new year ticks over?
Yeah, I think that once those planets go direct, we're in a place where all the planets will be direct. And that's a lot of forward inertia. And that's a lot of like, and we're starting with, we just had the winter solstice, cardinal energy. Pluto's in cardinal now, locked into Aries. So there is a lot of initiating forces. And I would say that the beginning of this year is much more beneficial for the action, where the end of 2022 felt like it was very sticky. It was, trying to keep our head above the clouds in some way, not getting lost in situations. We kind of start the year with a little bit of that, but it's not too long after the new year that we are all direct moving forward. And this is where, gosh, the things that you can start and initiate, stay persistent on, especially if they're involve some kind of tweak or some kind of different approach. There's so much that can carry forward. But I do think that the beginning of 2023 is a big like you can't be lazy either, and we might want to be. And that's the hard thing too, is that we've been going at it hard for the last especially 2 years. You could say this has been one of the weirdest, hardest 2 years maybe ever, just with psychology, with being told certain things, not being able to see what is true. Polarity and duality has never been so, I guess, noticeable or apparent. To like a great divide everywhere you look. So to not get caught up in what appears to be rattling the cage and driving energy apart that doesn't necessarily need to be apart, but it is starting the things and keeping your head above the clouds and seeing things as clearly from an inner place as possible, and then initiating and going for those things with that approach that you're not unsure or you're not foggy, because it's a deeper sort of knowing, because we've done so much. You could say Pluto in Capricorn has defined destiny. It tore it apart and it rebuilt it back up. And we're in this final stage where, gosh, that's going to be Pluto square the nodes collectively. Are you ready to blaze a trail and start your destiny? With people with the square to the South Node in Libra, because it was the South Node that met with Pluto last. So there's something about the importance of the South Node where it's not just like, don't do relationships, don't find beauty and balance and harmony. We need to take beauty, balance, harmony, and relationships forward, and we need to take them into a defining place because we know ourselves. So it's easy once you know yourself and where you're going to define your relationships. Anytime we're following just what somebody else is doing, though, there'll be repercussions in life. And that's Pluto in Capricorn. It's like, reminds me of an FBI agent, like stalking you. Like, you slipped, you slipped up. We got you. So that it is that tactfulness. So I do think it's very fitting that it's the year of the rabbit, because it's such a year to be very tactful, but yet responsive, but also gentle and caring and loving. And we need to bring that into the pioneering of what things are looking like without just being passive and letting somebody else dictate the journey that we're going on.
So it sounds like we really need to bring it back, because I don't know about you, but I feel that there was care and tact in 2020, whether you agreed with what was happening or not. Everybody cared about everybody. But the last couple of years, it feels like it's fallen away and it's been very I don't even have the right language for it, but that care for others kind of disappeared because if you didn't agree with me, well, then you're on the other side and that was it. But it sounds like that is what needs to come back.
It does. I agree. That was a
And
big thing that we had with Jupiter and Neptune and Pisces, right? I mean, that was a once in a lifetime transit and the most compassionate and sort of unconditional sign in the zodiac. Maybe we didn't see that play out right away because things were so uncertain and people were still trying to figure it out. But I think you'll see that more evolved souls really did get the message and are ready to figure out how they can define a way forward that is best for themselves. But because of a high integrity and a character within themselves, it's not just a selfish thing, it is a collective thing. You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah.
it's not just like the me of Aries. It's kind of like, yeah, well, I have to do me because if I do and I do this sort of different approach at the same time, then I'm liberating more than just myself. And I'm becoming a leader and showing the way. It's like you can lead by just being. Like that's probably the best leadership role I would say is to just actually be doing something that is liberating yourself, that is showing that you're willing to create life and, you know, define rules in your own way, that that's going to be the cool thing.
And I also think by showing people and leading the way, it can sometimes show people that what they thought was impossible is actually possible.
Exactly.
And also give them the courage to do what they're too scared to do, which isn't a judgment on anybody. I understand it. It's just sometimes you need that person that seems crazy or selfish to.
That's exactly it. What very well said.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
So the next date that I have is March 7th when Saturn enters Pisces, and Saturn will stay there for the next sort of, is it 2.5 or 3 years? And Saturn will also stay in Pisces through the retrograde. But are there any other dates or charts that we should see before we get to March 7th?
Yeah, we can look at some before March 7th that I
Mm-hmm.
find interesting. That is one of the more interesting things in the first part of the year, I would say. Um, Actually, it really is March that, in my opinion, is. I mean, I think we should just start there because I do actually think that it's right before we come into Aries season. We're
Mm-hmm.
closing out really the astrological year. And yeah, March is kind of when it all starts to go down in a different way, which is why I would say up until March, when we do have all these planets direct, it's go time because Saturn will be direct, and that's a big thing. And while Saturn's direct, it's like school's in session. It's time to work. It's time to achieve. It's time to connect. It's time to innovate. It's time to find what's fair, especially in Aquarius. Like Libra gets like the scales of justice and like fairness, but Aquarius takes fairness and justice to a whole nother level because it's not even looking at it necessarily from a, I don't know, in a court manner or like a you're wrong, you're right. It's like we all can be connected together. We all can innovate in our own unique way. And I think that that's big. And I will say that that ingress into Pisces is going to be very felt because we've had such a strong Saturn over the last 5 years, going through Capricorn, going through Aquarius, with Pluto, Jupiter Saturn conjunction. So many big aspects to Saturn that when it finally leaves rulership, and if you look here, I think you can see my mouse
Yes.
on my cursor, you're seeing Saturn at just a +1. Saturn's been at plus anywhere from +8 to +11, depending on other positions and, you know, terms that's been taking place. So to have Saturn lose so much control is a big deal. And it is the planet of karma. It's coming into the collective 12th house of Pisces. That deals, of course, with karma. So we're at a place where Pluto's finishing up in the ruling sign of Capricorn, where Saturn rules, where it's been for a long time, that it is this intense sort of dissolution or this big dissolve that we're starting to really see take place in the societies that we were so entrenched in. Now it's going to be different depending on where you're at in the world because different places have different rules, different cultures. But it's almost like the culture that we were in some way indoctrinated or born into, this is a huge deal. Like this is a major, whoa, that isn't real? Or the question of, is that real? So it's very interesting, and we're going to have to learn to, it is going to be more surrender, more let go. Um,
Will it soften the energy at all with Saturn having been so strong?
it
And then
will, but there's also the intense sort of, and we get into institutions because 12th house, and we kind of talked about that earlier. The 12th house does deal with institutions, hospitals, mental institutions, jails, it,
banking.
banking. There's something about this Saturn in Pisces that if you didn't do the necessary work, especially over the last, we'll say 28 and a half year, but really it's like 23 years since Saturn was in Aries, that we might have to get put in some there. We might see a lot of jail or prison stuff that comes up in the collective, which would
Or
only
camps.
manifest, I believe, to the people that didn't sort of spiritually sort of ascend in some way within themselves. It's almost like the universe is going to pick and choose who really did put sort of this big work in. So it's very interesting of how people might get secluded and taken out of society in some way over the next 2 years, or people just actually taking themselves out of society to live a more spiritual life. But there's something about the 12th house and Pisces, and especially with Saturn there, where you have to really do the inner work. Saturn's work, Pisces is your soul pretty much, your consciousness. It's like really doing that conscious work is so important. Or if you don't take a time out to do that yourself, somehow, some way, the universe is going to do it for you. So that is a big ingress, and it's going to feel way different. But I do think that Saturn loses some power, of course. And I do think that it leaves also Saturn being sort of, right, Capricorn, government, law, man-made law. We're also seeing where it's losing its boundaries. So that can go a couple ways, where it doesn't have control and it's not able to kind of round up people, or um, where the boundaries of how far control goes has no limits either. And it's even more potent with Pluto at this critical degree of 29 Capricorn for the ingress. But not only that, spending a good majority of this year still in Capricorn of 2023 and finishing up these last degrees. So it's definitely about spiritually and physically playing the game very smart and listening to your feelings, because Pisces is feeling oriented. But I would say too, it is sort of you do have to surrender and let go to the change that maybe we see government or structure, or just gosh, it goes to a lot of different aspects. Like it's not just government, it's not just, I mean, it's physical. It's sort of the DNA structure of the physical reality we live in, having to really mutate, and that can shake people up and make people feel like they're going crazy. And it can feel like there's a like it reminds me of Looney Tunes. Like Pisces has like Looney Tune energy to it as well. There's a little bit of chaos. There's a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Um, so we can definitely see a lot of that take place, and we just don't want to like lose ourselves, because a lot of it is a show, a projection at the same time. So that's kind of what I got for that Saturn ingress, and kind of where things could go. But right when it comes in, Saturn, is about to enter shadow. It's going to come back to 0 degrees of Pisces and station. So
But
no
when
more Aquarius.
Saturn retrogrades, it won't actually move out of Pisces, will it?
Exactly. Exactly. So both Saturn and Jupiter by the end of this year will be locked and loaded in Pisces and Taurus, which is the first major aspect between them, which is the 30 degree or the 60-degree sextile
Mm-hmm.
since the conjunction on December 21st of 2020. So that too is a big deal, because they're making a really nice aspect that does have to do with knowing our worth, knowing our spiritual worth, knowing how to kind of be a magician in a little bit of ways, and create new structure in undefined ways, and really how to use different resources than ever before. So that's one of the most positive things this year too, is that sextile.
And when is that happening?
So it's right after this new moon in Gemini, and right before the winter solstice or the summer solstice. That's really when we see Saturn and Uranus in their exact sextile coming into the summer solstice, June 21st. And they hold that energy for a little while, because Saturn's going to retrograde at 7. So it just started to go retrograde here.
Mm-hmm.
And then Jupiter is going to only go up to 15, but it's going to come back. So they're going to be in a long, sextile here, which is definitely a big deal. And even the sun, when it starts to make that trine to Saturn, it'll be a big sextile triangle to Jupiter
But
in
these are
Taurus.
all good aspects.
Oh, trines and sextiles? No, they're more harmonious. They're very friendly. So we are seeing sort of a friendly approach to our intuition, showing us how to amplify our worth and how to think more non-linearly and to use our imagination. It's almost like if we can focus on imagining new innovative ways, we're doing ourselves a favor, because already at this point we're seeing Pluto back at 29 degrees of Capricorn, and it had already been in Aquarius, which was like definitely a potent punch of new energy that we haven't felt in our lives. And I think that it's also showing us that we have to use sort of a higher dimensional way to build and to create. And even when we see that Uranus at 20 degrees, 21, coming into that third decan, it's going to start making a trine over to Pluto for much of this year and then into next year, which is an amazing aspect to have, because it's going to make the exact trine in air, of course, Uranus in Gemini, Pluto in Aquarius. But this is the first time they've been in a harmonious aspect in quite some time. So it's showing us that it's okay to be revolutionary, and that we have immense power to define new sort of ways of going about things, or trying new things, or innovating new ways. And I think that's where the imagination with Jupiter and Saturn, because Saturn's not really imaginative, but in Pisces, we almost have to, we want to use that and kind of focus our intention and our intuition into how to amplify our physical reality. And it's definitely very intent based. Like if we really do believe and we're ready to put the work in, I mean, this is some of the best things that could happen collectively and personally.
And this is a beauty of astrology, even when we're dealing with a lot of difficult transits in terms of the things building, whether it be military, war, or the um, financial institutions or anything like that. It gives us these beautiful moments within the astrology, which I think is what manages to keep us going through everything.
I completely agree.
So we also have Mars, and I didn't note down the date, but it's clearly happening in March with a final Gemini, uh, with its final square to Neptune while it's still in Gemini.
Oh yeah, the final square.
Yes. So how big a deal is that one?
It is a big deal. It's going to be happening a little bit more faster. The last two squares to Neptune that we had were much slower. So it is nice that we're going to see Mars done with a retrograde, finishing up its shadow and ready to really get out of Gemini where, gosh, that was a long transit,
So
long,
long,
I
so
believe six
long.
months, So gosh, our mind and has just been absolutely beat up in many ways, but it's stronger now, understanding ourselves and information and getting sort of quick energy back is going to be good. But Mars square Neptune's never a fun transit. It's always where we tend to forget about our own self. We can lose ourself. We become susceptible to outside energy. It's it's very weakening on the immune system in a lot of ways. I saw a lot of people get sick in different ways with Mars square Neptune. It kind of we're very vulnerable, and Mars is very related to health. It's interesting. I've noticed it with people, but also with myself. Whenever Mars comes into my sixth, or when a harsh Mars aspect happens to my sixth house ruler, something shows up. So Mars is related to that, and Neptune takes away all the boundaries and it kind of weakens our defense, but it also weakens our defense in our mind too. So again, we're in a clouded space of maybe feeling like we can't take the action that we need early March, which if I want to pull that up for you, that exact day, because I don't have that exact day saved, but
Just
it
while
will
you're
be
looking for
March
that,
15th, March 16th.
I'll just say, as an Aries with Gemini rising, Gemini moon, this retrograde Mars being in Gemini for such a long period, and when it was moving direct, it wasn't such an issue, but this retrograde has been difficult. I am
It
counting the
has.
days for this to be done.
It has been difficult. And when it happens, it's I mean, it's wild that we have a moon that's going to be in Sagittarius opposing Mars. We're also going to see a third quarter square from the sun and the moon, sun in Pisces, Mercury in Pisces with Neptune, all square Mars. Yeah, it's not that's not going to feel it's either going to you're either going to be completely numb and just kind of like doing your own thing and just saying whatever to life, especially media related life,
Hmm.
and just kind of staying persistent here and dedicated to yourself, or you're so susceptible to get swept up in something that has absolutely nothing to do with you. And it can be emotional to the highest degree. And it can cause, I feel like it can cause us a lot of mental and, emotional pain. Doesn't have to, but this is where we have to, make good choices for ourselves and have a high awareness. And the higher our spiritual awareness, the easier it'll be to not attach ourselves so strongly to anything that takes place to where we're just like letting outside information or a black screen dictate how we feel on the inside.
And how long does this square with Mars and Neptune last? Is it a quick one or is it one
Yeah,
that
it's just
lasts?
going to be a few days.
Okay.
I mean, really, like close. You could say that we start kind of feeling it around May 8th, they'll be in like a 3-degree orb. We're going to kind of feel that coming. So
Do you mean March 8th?
March 8th, sorry.
Yep.
And then it does kind of a release once it passes the square. But then we're dealing with Sun square Mars, and that's going to be a long drawn out, few day transit as well. So yeah, the mid March is, going to be like a 2-week time where, gosh, and Venus will be square Pluto at 29 Aries in its detriment position. Pluto's like ready to see what Aquarius has to offer and where things can go.
So Pluto does move into Aquarius, but
Yeah,
just
March
because you've got
23rd. So
just
just
because
right after this.
yeah, so just because you've got this chart up, because this is on March 25th, so we're just going to stay here for half a second. So Mars finally leaves Gemini and moves into Cancer. How will that feel once Mars moves into Cancer? Is that a happy place for Mars or not so much?
No. Mars is at fall position in Cancer. Mars is in such an interesting place in this part of the zodiac because it comes into Aries. It's like, hell yeah,
Yeah,
let's go. I'm fired up. This is my sign. I know what I want. Me, me, me. I'm gonna make it happen. And it gets into Taurus and it's like, oh wait, I moved a little fast. I gotta
yeah.
slow down. I'm tired. Like that was a lot. And then it comes into Gemini where it's like, oh, actually, you know what? I want to move fast as hell. But it retrograded and was there for half a year.
Mm.
So that slowed it down. And then it comes into fall position in Cancer where it doesn't really want to be either, but it will make a nice trine over to Saturn right when it comes in for the first week. It's going to square, the sun's still kind of in square to Mars. It's pulling apart, but it's going to quincunx Pluto that just came into zero Aquarius one or a day and a half sooner, day and a half prior on March 23rd. So it's absolutely not a fun position, but we have to know how to trust our gut with Mars in Aries, and especially with Saturn in Pisces in
In
trine.
Cancer.
Yeah, Mars in Cancer, Saturn in Pisces.
Oh, sure. Sorry.
Um, we really do want to trust our intuition, trust our gut. And if we're able to not sidestep things, but actually be assertive with what we know feels good, then it's very potent. Mars is going to make great aspects to the nodes when it comes into Cancer. It's going to make great aspects to the south node, to Saturn. There's going to be a bit of a grand trine, which is very harmonious. And it's such a portal, but we have to trust our inner guidance and our inner truth and our inner wisdom. And Saturn is wisdom. It's like old man, old, grandma, like they've lived a lot of life and all, they talk and give you some advice and you're like, I want to listen to that. Well, that's your intuition now. And even Jupiter in Aries, Jupiter is sort of a higher self intuitive planet. It's in Aries too, but it's with Chiron. So it's like we might want to miss out on such a great aspect that's trying to show us how to act, to build, and to create. But it's almost like we're going to doubt ourselves. And that's where Mars in Cancer is hard because one little thing can trigger our emotions and send us into a pit of despair, like we can get triggered so easily. So we have to not be triggered by the things that are not ours. And we have to be really, I think, gentle to ourselves too, and not be the ones in our own lives that are telling us that we can't do something. Because this is where the craziest thing that you never thought was possible is it's like officially really possible. We've never seen Pluto in Aquarius. This is innovation to the highest level. There's going to be a lot of people who say that the craziest technology we've ever seen will come out in Aquarius with Pluto there. I think it's deeper than that. It's almost like we have to take a step backwards. And I think we're realizing technology within us, our intuition, our inner guidance, our self-worth, that technology is going to be the innovation that creates a really special place to be. But this is like a big test when Mars comes in here to use it. It's like, if you can come into this place at this point in the year after the summer solstice, which the summer solstice chart, or I'm sorry, the spring equinox chart is amazing. And I can't believe I didn't save it here because it's a new moon in Aries. So right before we see both these big ingresses, we get this new moon at 0 Aries. And just 2 days after, we see Pluto ingress. And 2 days after, a day and a half, 2 days after Pluto ingresses, we see Mars ingress. So this spring equinox is quite a big deal because Jupiter is currently at that 0 point. And for the winter solstice of 2022, we saw the sun come in and square that Jupiter exact. Not only that, but this is the first of 2 new moons in Aries that take place with Mars ingressing and Pluto ingressing. And the second one is a solar eclipse at 29. So it's a big year for Aries energy, especially for Aries like yourself.
I have had my chart looked at for 2023, and apparently March is a really good month. So is April. So I'm just trusting what's coming,
Yeah,
that it's
I
all
think
where it's meant to be.
exactly. This is the test coming into the end of March and into June, or I'm sorry, into May or April. Gosh, I'm so off with my calendar right now. Or into April, is that we're really finding this identification and the power and our truth so that we can know that and then act when we feel it. So it's this very responsive energy that we want to have. So
Now, when Pluto moves into Aquarius on March 23rd, it only stays there until June 11th, and then it retrogrades back into Pisces. So we're just for those few months, we're getting a preview of what's coming with Pluto in Aquarius. Is that one of the biggest transits of the year because it's such a big shift because Pluto will be there for 20 years, or is it not going to be as sort of startling as we necessarily think?
oh, the Pluto ingress,
Mm.
just in general.
Yes. And the energy of Pluto moving into Aquarius, because for 20 years we've had it sitting there in Pisces.
uh Capricorn.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah, totally. It's been it Pluto's so slow.
I knew that was wrong
And
when I was saying it.
and it's it's gonna rub over this knot. And there's this anaretic degree of 29 Capricorn, 0 degree. These are very intense degrees in astrology. And to just kind of, when Pluto just sits there and rubs over these things, I mean, we're like feeling so on edge because there's change that I think in a deeper form we can feel is taking place. Aquarius is so weird because it wants to connect, but gosh, will it disconnect too? So it's like, oh, disconnect, connect, on, off, on, off. Oh, back into this. And I do feel like there's an essence that, like, in a sense, like Saturn, Capricorn is trying to continuously pull us back into it. And it's almost like even with Saturn in Pisces, there can be like these illusions of it's almost like trying to lure a kid with candy. Come back here. I got this. Like,
And
and
even though we get the preview, because it only stays at 0 degrees, will that not really give us a true idea of what's coming? So do we really need to wait until 2024?
I mean, we're not going to know the full spectrum until it's done. Like, it's such a long haul process. So no, I don't think at all that like we have it completely understood about what this future is going to be right away. But your Aquarius and Uranus really does, it rules your wrists, your ankles, and these are body parts we have that are so flexible and they move in ways that no other part of our body can move. So I think right at the beginning, it's the weird movements that we can make them. Don't be so rigid. Capricorn is rigid, steel, concrete. You know what I'm saying? Like bones. We're now in some weird joint energy and we're going back and forth between, well, I'm just rigid structure and come back into this. And then there's almost like this freedom to move in ways that we've never moved before. And I think we get a taste of it in 2023. Are we going to keep going? How can I move over there? How can I, adjust myself this way to make this work? It's going to be all about adjustments.
So when Pluto retrogrades, will it be a struggle energetically for people that go, oh my goodness, I feel this sense of freedom. I'm able to move and take all these different directions that I didn't necessarily think was possible. And then when it retrogrades back into Capricorn, people are going to feel stuck again until the final move of Pluto into Aquarius, when it stays.
It's very possible. Yeah. And I'll just show this chart because I think this shows an example of how difficult this can feel. Is that Jupiter is going to ingress into Taurus May 16th, and we're dealing with Jupiter square Pluto retrograde, 0 degrees, and we're dealing with Mars finishing up in its fall position, where we can be way too emotional, get angry because we're not we want to do things, but it's not comfortable to move in ways we've never moved before. And Mars is going to get ready to make this ingress into Leo and oppose Pluto with Jupiter still there, which I think is just a fascinating chart because it's this huge T square at the 0 point of Aries, Leo, to Jupiter in Taurus, which has the north and south node right there, in 3-degree orb. I mean, this is huge fixed cross energy where people are absolutely going to feel tested by other people, by control, not feeling like they can do what they want to make them happy, or feeling like the adjustments or the angle to get to what would make them happy is impossible. But I think we have to remember it's Jupiter North Node in Taurus. I mean, you can expand some of the most abundant things in your life, and you can draw power from these unique approaches, and you can draw courage from Mars and Leo. And it's like, if you can use passion and courage to really find value and to amplify that value, oh my gosh, like, wow, what a transit. What a transit. But it's also if you're going to be too one-sided and only look at what makes you happy and say, fuck everybody else, and not put any attention into how to make things more, at least, objective. It's almost like there's a God complex that can come over maybe it's government stuff, maybe not, maybe it's just individuals in the collective that's trying to force, their way, or this is the innovative way. If you're not going this way, you're stupid. Whatever it is, like, this is definitely a big focus on understanding everybody's in a really strange transmutation and having to adapt in their own way and trying to find confidence in that. And if you can just see things from that perspective and have that compassion, but still build and do what you need to do to amplify so much of what you've learned within yourself, you can do to have what you need, I think you'll definitely get it. That's the best part about it. You can get it.
I almost wonder how difficult it will be with this movement of Pluto for people who enjoy rigidity and structure, and when there is this freedom to move in all these different directions, and where you'll have a certain portion of the population that will take that and run with it and go and try and innovate and do all these different things. But for the people that like things to be structured and remain as they are, I wonder how difficult that will be and the divide that that will bring to the collective.
Yeah, I would say that it could be exactly like that. And then Pluto coming back into Capricorn to stay for the rest of 2023 by June 11th is almost like people saying, I told you so. I
Mm.
told you you couldn't do that. And making you doubt yourself and making you feel like you can't. You know what I'm saying? So it's almost like,
Absolutely.
yep, I told you you had to be this way, and this is the rules. You couldn't possibly do things a different approach, even though you're not breaking any natural law, you're not doing anything to harm anybody else or their property, but told you, here's your ticket, pay your fine, whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
But again, it's this build up too as Pluto comes back into Capricorn, where we're seeing Jupiter at 5 degrees starting to make its amazing sextile to Saturn in their first aspect since their phasal relationship has started and their cycle began on the winter solstice of 2020. And it even comes with a moon Neptune. I mean, this is a deep psychological moment for the collective to dream big and to not oppress yourself and to not let others oppress you either. And yeah, it's big energy. It's it is that kind of energy where people can lose it, but some people are gonna say, no, no, no. No, I've learned way too much about myself to give up now. And if you can dream big and put the work in for those dreams without giving up, you'll see moving forward here how successful things can be.
Now, going back to April 20th, that's when we see the first of the eclipses of 2023. So, April 20th, we've got a total solar eclipse. And then on May 5th, we've got the lunar eclipse, which is in Scorpio. How big are those eclipses going to be?
I think that the solar eclipse at 29 Aries is as potent of an eclipse as you could possibly get. Because Jupiter's there, because it's in less than a 1 degree square to Pluto, now in Aquarius, that this solar eclipse is actually an amazing precursor to what Pluto in Aquarius is going to look like and how you can identify with a strong, different nature that has more answers than you ever could have realized, because Aquarius is so smart and it has a long-term memory built into it that goes way further than just this life, this incarnation. It's the Akashic records. So there is definitely a strong force that people are going to identify with so much of their inner knowing of where they've been as a soul and where they're going as a soul. And this can ignite the future for people and really show people the way. But again, there's always going to be the trap that says you can't. That some, society and the governments and the structure, these are going to change. You can come back and watch this video in 20 years and you'll be like, holy shit, I can't believe that our society as a collective has changed as much as it did in the last 20 years. But this is the glimpse of that. And, that's why I think Aries and Aquarius is such a beautiful mixture. And that's why they're in sextile, is because there's something about the courage to be unique and different and say, I don't care if you're doing what everybody else is doing. I'm going to do this. And if you're able to find that, oh my gosh. But it is also a 6 month, sort of eclipse energy it is a test too. It's a deep spiritual, deep soul test with Pluto. That's going to be like, are you actually going to move differently? Are you actually going to connect more to your true identity of yourself and stop playing follow the leader? Are you not the leader finally? You haven't realized you are the leader of your life?
I think over the last few years, especially with these divides that we've seen through the collective and the ways people have been feeling as they've been figuring out what is true, what isn't, what's right for them, and understanding that other people are making other choices. I sometimes wonder if it's just me because of who I am and what I believe in. So, therefore, on social media, I see a few things, or I see things that relate to my interests, my beliefs. But I do think there has genuinely been a huge awakening in spirituality over the last couple of years. I think a lot of people with more downtime have had time to reflect on where we are, what we're doing. And there has been a shift away from celebrity and that sort of fascination with that life. And people have come back to what's important to make my life mean more. And it sounds like that evolution is just going to continue.
Absolutely. That's the end of this age of Pisces. Is like, wow, we really discovered how much bigger everything is than just what is seen. And that there's so much more, and that we can access that more. And we don't have to be projected, we don't have to see a projection come from somewhere, like that we are projecting it. And yeah, I mean, there is a lot of beautiful things. And I think, again, I've said this before, we are so lucky to be here right now. That's the biggest illusion, that life sucks right now. And I know that there's all these little ways that Saturn and Capricorn is trying to manipulate us, with Pluto there and a South Node in Scorpio, into thinking, oh my gosh, well, the markets are going to crash, or gas is going to be $20 a gallon, or whatever it is. That's like, oh no. But there's always going to be an adjustment that can be made. And if you're willing to accept adjustments as they come and not be so attached, because that's where Aquarius thrives, is non-attachment. So by being non-attached, and that's why there's going to be a struggle with Pluto in Aquarius, because Pluto wants to hold on and merge and stay attached forever to the next life, you know? If we cannot be so attached and make adjustments, the possibilities just that you would never believe it. We haven't even thought of exactly where it's going to go yet. But the more attached we are, the more that we're susceptible to be overly connected to really a very weird, controlling utopia.
I find it really beautiful having conversations with people that are no longer living vicariously through celebrity, because
Mhm.
I think back to my life. Let's go back 10, 15 years. And it was when magazines were everywhere, before everything became digitized. I'm having trouble getting my words out tonight.
We can feel that Mercury already in Mars.
Right.
Oh man.
But I would go and have lunch with friends, coffee with friends, and we would sit there. And if one of us got there early, we'd have a magazine, we'd talk about what everybody was doing. And those conversations are gone. Nobody cares what anybody else is doing. And I love that I get to sit with people now and talk about what we're doing to make our world better, whether it be personally or at a larger level. I love that people are reading more and delving into spirituality. And even if they're just beginning and their knowledge isn't there isn't the depth there that maybe I have or you have. It's the fact that they're on the path and they're learning, and it's just such a beautiful thing. And to think that that's what it is moving forward and that will continue, that is, I think, what gives me the most hope.
I'm with you. And I think that that's one of the most beautiful things is seeing people remember. It's this great remembering that takes place, that we're so much more than what we see here. And the more of us that realize that, the changes are, gosh, it's crazy. The
Well,
pyramids were built with energy like that. You know what I'm saying? Like things that we could never even dream of. So every time I see somebody having that moment, I'm like, yeah. And I know it comes with a lot, because when you have to change your whole sort of philosophy on life and what's real and what isn't real, that can be, and you really wonder what's real and what's not real. And there's definitely moments where it's hard, but then there's this grounding nature. And I think that the Taurus energy this year is, and even the Capricorn with Pluto finishing, there's a grounded element that can kind of hold people here a little bit before we kind of go into places we've never gone before, alien territory, but we're the aliens.
right. And this is a whole thing. Aliens don't seem, well, to me, I can only speak for myself, but they don't seem scary anymore. But I know my sister, I never used to be able to have conversations with her about aliens. And now we talk about it frequently. And it's not scary anymore. I think it's discovering that we are limitless
Hmm.
if we believe. But back to the astrology. So July 17th, the nodes shift. So they've been in Taurus and Scorpio for 18 months. So they'll be shifting into Aries and Libra. So how much of a shift are we going to feel as the nodes move?
That's always a big one. I feel like when the nodes move, we definitely start to see the manifestations almost instantly, especially on the south node side of things. I think that this node ingress is one of the most fascinating ones, the Taurus to Aries and Scorpio to Libra, because the dispositors flip. So Venus has been the dispositor of the north node, and it flips to the dispositor of the south node. And same with the south node. It was co-disposited by Mars, and now Mars is dispositing the north node. So this one's a very interesting one. And I do think that that's probably what we see a lot of when the nodes do ingress, and then moving through the second half of 2023, especially with Pluto finishing this, station that it's coming towards in Capricorn, is justice, the justice system, the court system, the fairness, the integrity. Possibly, could boil down to a lot of stuff from past elections, but it's going to bring a oh, it's so funny. I do want to put the nodes. I thought this chart, I must have moved it back just 1 hour there. Of There's going to be such a focus on, I would say, legal matters, because Libra is very legal. It's very judicial. So there's going to be a heavy emphasis on that, and square Pluto. And it's building up towards that exact square. So very interesting. And in our relationships and our contracts, like I mentioned, like contract void earlier,
Mm-hmm.
that's going to be the big thing that we're going to have to learn to let go of. And it even comes on a new moon in Cancer that we see that ingress. And it even comes with the moon square the nodes later that day. So what an ingress for the nodes. And then having Venus, which is just 3 days away from stationing retrograde. That's another big thing that we get this year in Leo at 28 degrees. Like, wow, we just had the south node with Mars that had a big retrograde in Gemini. And now the south node, the dispositor is Venus, and it's going to have a big retrograde here in Leo, although it'll be in really good aspects to the nodes with trines and sextiles. It's relationships are going to be a big thing. All the things that we build relationships to, whether it's the structure of life, whether it's people, whether it's jobs, whatever we have some kind of contract with, is going to get tested in a way that, are we really doing what we love? Are we really doing what makes us feel good and what's happy in our life? And I think that that's the big thing with these nodes, is that we cannot sit and be complacent when contracts are not working or when we're being taken advantage of. It's just not like going to be that energy of wait around, keep waiting, keep waiting. It's like the action and the Martian energy of that North Node in Aries with Mars, which will be in Virgo, helping us ground, Mars in Virgo can be a well-oiled machine. We can get so many things done. We can be to the point, focused. It is not ADHD, it is on its game. There is no time to sit around and, mess around with this thought or this thing. It's hyper focused on what makes us happy and what makes us feel like we're doing ourself in a way that we really do identify with. So I would say that it's a huge ingress, and I absolutely think we're going to feel it right away. There's going to be a strong pull, not only to find relationships, but we're going to start to see what's up with so many things that as a collective we have built relationships with. And if they're not working, it's time to start over. And that's North Node Aries as well. Start fresh.
And this is also where the universe says, I gave you a chance to do the work, and if you didn't do it, I'm going to do it for you.
Exactly.
So 2 days after this, on July 19th, to the 21st, we have Mars in Virgo opposing Saturn in Pisces.
Yeah. That's of course a big one, and it'll even be right in that zone when Venus does station direct. So that Venus station is quite a big deal. And I think that this Mars opposite Saturn, I mean, it's been a long time since we've seen Mars move, because in 2022, like as we're recording this, Mars was retrograde in Gemini. Mars and Saturn met in Aquarius. So now we're seeing the halfway point of the Mars-Saturn cycle. And after all we've learned, and after all we've had to re-understand about ourselves and how to take quick action or how to, do something, then we meet Saturn in Pisces for an opposition, and it's a completely different energy than where we started the cycle. And it's almost like we don't want to be so fixated on this super particular way. We have to still look at the bigger, broader, infinite potential, but we also have to get through the block and the guilt, even with Virgo, of if we do it, will it work? Or will God be happy with us? Or will the universe be happy? There's a very big subconscious sort of block here. It's almost like, gosh, we really do need to be compassionate and find relationships, but then Venus is stationing, South Node's in Libra, Mars is the dispositor of the North Node. Like, again, it does kind of, it's a balance point between being overly compassionate and taking initiative to change your reality and to keep working and to keep going when it can feel like this is some of the weirdest, craziest, hardest psychological work we've ever had to do. And the sun will be trine Neptune at that same time and starting to oppose Pluto. And of course, Pluto square the node still. So really, like June into the parts of September are like extremely, this is some, we don't have a lot of control. That's the truth of the matter. We can want to define and control and have things so perfect, but I would say even Saturn finishing up in Pisces has another level too, where God's in control. Things are going to happen. We have to be compassionate. We can't be lost either. We have to still find the reality, but not get our panties in a bunch in many ways over what maybe we see that tries to double down on a contract of a relationship to some aspect of our life that actually just it's like a sadomasochistic relationship that we just want to stay in, but we really don't. And why are we still in this?
Because we don't have a choice. We're on a roller coaster that we can't get off.
So there's part of it that's trusting that the roller coaster will stop or at least calm down,
Mm.
and that there's a plan from a higher place in life that if we can tap into and find comfort in, there's we'll be good. But it takes like a strong spiritual identification and trust that is very important. So
So then on July 22nd, we have Venus, and you've touched on this several times, but Venus stations retrograde in Leo, and it doesn't go direct till September 3rd. Will this be a really powerful retrograde with Venus being in Leo the whole time, or?
yeah, this is a very interesting Venus retrograde because it's the first retrograde of Venus in a long time where it's kind of spent the whole time in a sign that it doesn't mind being in.
Mm.
And it did Capricorn, and you could say that Venus doesn't hate Capricorn. There's something about Venus and Saturn that do get along better than you would expect, you know. But we've seen Scorpio, we've seen Virgo, all these, you know, different places, and even just Capricorn with Pluto, like, oh God. That there is something about this Leo that is very different, and it's helping us get back to this relationship to our creative self and to an aspect that we can find the courage to show our potential to create in ways that are different. And you know, going into this Pluto and Aquarius energy that there's there's something about finding the courage to love and to almost love in ways we've never loved before. But again, it's about like also being willing to break contracts that are not built around love. Very fascinating retrograde, and especially because it right when it stations, the nodes shift, and it's not the dispositor of the north node anymore, it's the dispositor of the south node. So, and it's in sextile to it. So we have to figure out the contracts that make our heart happy so that we can initiate a powerful way forward. Or we're just staying stuck in situations. You know, we can get really sticky with a south node in Libra, where we're definitely just saying it's fine, it's okay. But is it actually beautiful? Is it actually the aesthetic of life that we want? Does it make us feel like we're around the right reflection of life? So we have to, you know, I think Leo's so important because if Aries is the I am, Leo is the oh fucking yes I am. It takes the identification to the highest level where it knows itself and it's fixed in who it is so that it can do what it needs to do and rule its life and rule its creative energy. So this is going to help. I mean, Venus retrogrades are hard, especially for feminine energy, but the feminine energy in all of us, it's going to show us exactly what we don't love.
I've never found Venus retrogrades to be that difficult, to be perfectly honest. And maybe
I
it's
have
because
Venus retrograde.
in your birth chart.
Yeah, I don't feel them that much either.
And I don't know.
I do, but I don't. I'm kind of with you on that one.
Yeah. And I always kind of dread it. I do find that the X's come out of the woodwork, which I find really funny. And so it's interesting you talking about the South Node being in Libra and sort of, you know, it being sticky. If you're going, yeah, it's fine, it's fine, it's fine. But this is the whole point of the South Node, isn't it? Isn't it to leave behind what we used to do and move forward, which is where the North Node is, and
Exactly.
pick what's right for us. And so this Venus retrograde kind of seems to be doubling down on what we're meant to be learning with the South Node. So it means when that X, this is my take on it, when the X comes out of the woodwork, you don't need to accept what's fine and what's not working anymore.
That's exactly what the South Node does. And that's why it manifests so powerfully in our physical reality, because it's trying to really show us what works and what doesn't. And we're really meant to leave and throw away and get rid of the stuff that doesn't work. Because there's plenty of relationships or contracts or agreements or, you know, I want to say this word and I can't remember how to say it.
And Mercury's getting both of us.
Diplomatic approaches that are not working. It's like trying to be a diplomat and going in with the same execution over and over again, but not getting the deal done. So the South Node makes all these things very apparent. And if we're able to identify them with a North Node in Aries and move forward with what we know wasn't working, then the stuff that was working is going to be so potent because it works. So that's why the South Node's so powerful, is because it really does show us what we need to dissolve. It's not time's up, had its purpose. Can you move in the other direction of that?
And I think it's twofold. It's ending those toxic cycles that we have with ourselves. And also, I've noticed in my relationships, and I tend not to make the same mistake twice, but the universe will sometimes bring an ex back, or someone who is essentially your ex in a different wrapping. So somebody that, if you look beyond the initial feelings, you're able to see that it's the same person dressed up in a different package.
Yeah.
And the moment you say no, the universe says, you passed my test.
Absolutely.
Let's move forward. And it gives you different things. That's my personal experience. So I've always found that Venus retrogrades aren't as bad. I always brace myself, but I don't have Venus retrograde in my chart, but I find Mercury and Mars affects me a whole lot more than Venus, just on a personal note, because everyone needed to know that.
Yeah, well, I completely agree with what you said. It's showing all the things that don't work when it comes to what we want to balance our life with.
And when the universe talks, we need to listen if we want the better things in life. So then we move on to July 23rd to 25th, Pluto opposing or squaring the nodes.
Yes.
And this is not long after they've moved into their new space.
I mean, it really is. It blows my mind, actually, because really it's the chart we were just looking at. Like the Venus station retrograde is an exact Pluto square the nodes to the minute. 2906, 2906, 2906. And the sun at 0 Leo, well, yeah, guess what? That's in a degree opposition. So it's extremely tight. I mean, this is where in 2023 we're going to start to see, probably more than ever, like the recovery steps of how to build the right relationships to every single thing that we want to structure around our life. And we got to go into these relationships, and we do have to be a diplomat, and we're going to have to debate, and we're going to have to talk things out and find the middle ground, so that whatever it is, so that we can make a judicial decision in our own lives about where the forward progression is, where's the identification of how we want to identify with our life. And does it align with our heart? That's going to be a huge thing. A big, big thing. It reminds me of a Uranus opposition. Just with Pluto on the cusp and going into Aquarius, like it reminds me of that energy where, it's like we're all in some kind of a midlife crisis transit, where we realized how much we have not been living life in our heart, how much we have not been doing things the way that we want to do it. And it's like, damn, is the collective going to go out and buy a Harley? Everybody? Like, we're just going to go wild? this could absolutely be where we see people go wild. Kind of like, I'm tired of living a life that sucks. I am tired. I am so tired of it. I would rather give up certain aspects that I've built a relationship to start fresh with things that make me happy and where I feel like I'm actually myself. So Venus is going to help with that in retrograde. It's going to speed up the process of relating to our great creative abilities and how to really shine a light, and how to also, it's going to help us with our confidence when all's said and done too. And that's the beauty too of a North Node that's been in Taurus, is if we could use that energy over the last 18 months before they make this ingress, that we know how to feel confident and secure and hear, and how to create and how to stay persistent and work through things, that it's going to be easy to identify what we want to have any kind of relationship with. So I think that it has a lot of benefit to it, and it's a very unique Venus retrograde because it does sort of change the star pattern from what we're used to. And we never see Venus retrograde in signs that it really likes to be in. Even if it would retrograde a couple times in Libra in the past, it would go into Virgo and be in fall, or from Virgo to Leo. So,
And then moving on to October. October 14th, we have the solar eclipse in Libra, and then October 28th, we have the lunar eclipse in Taurus. Will these be as big as the eclipses earlier in the year?
absolutely. The solar eclipse in Libra is definitely a tight orb to the south node. It's it I actually haven't looked. Did you say it was a total?
I didn't say because I don't know.
I could look, but I haven't looked at that yet.
I should have done more research.
Yeah, October 14th is the total, and the one on the 20th is actually like a solar hybrid
Okay.
eclipse. But yeah, it's a total solar. Um, oh, I guess it's annular, so it's not quite. It's close. It's close, but it'll definitely be visible too, I think, right? Like 11 a.m.
Mm.
You know, this is something we haven't gotten in a while, is to see solar eclipses on the Western Hemisphere.
The last one that we had
I
was
think
when
it,
Trump was president, wasn't
yeah, it was
it?
2017.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So definitely interesting just on that notion that we can see this one. Solar eclipses with the South Node are very interesting because they do heighten more of the South Node qualities. So we have to kind of look and see where we are. Are we really getting, it's more of the Venus stuff, and Venus, of course, will be out of the retrograde, but it disposits this whole eclipse with the South Node, the Moon, the Sun, and it's in fall position in Virgo and coming off an opposition to Saturn. I mean, this is, I feel like feeling guilted. This is something that we're gonna have to break, like some kind of like generational sort of guilt about what we define relationships as and what they're tied to. It's definitely going to be where we see everything pretty clearly, but we also feel like there's no way we could make a change, or it's too much work. But Mars will be in Scorpio, where it does like to be. So if we can identify passionately and stay on it and kind of break the curse, is what kind of comes to mind. Like, it has like break the curse energy.
And then moving on to the lunar eclipse on October 28th.
Yes, lunar eclipse in Taurus.
So all of the eclipse cycles in 2023, they're just two eclipses per cycle. We don't have a third, which we sometimes do.
Yeah, sometimes we have four, but not, or we sometimes we get five. This
Oh,
one,
wow.
yeah, we just get two cycles,
Mm-hmm.
a solar lunar,
Yeah.
solar lunar. I mean, this one's an interesting one because it's an exalted moon. Jupiter's there. Jupiter is retrograde. It's in good aspects to Saturn with a trine and a sextile. There's definitely more positive sort of energy because of that exalted moon. But again, Venus disposits the moon and Jupiter and the south node, and it's in Virgo, and it's just like it takes work to get what we want. And as long as we can stay on it, and I think that Mars in Scorpio is a great gift, and it's going to be with the sun pretty much all of November and into December. That is a lot of masculine energy that can be extremely all in and passionate, but it has to be all in and passionate for its true identification of itself and the value. So we're seeing the monetary, how do we create money, right? What is valuable? These are things that we're going to have to dive into. We're going to have to figure it out. It's just like the more we stay persistent and on it, the better off we'll be. But it's almost like, gosh, how do I identify a new value system just within myself, let alone within the collective? And how do I apply it? But I think that we can do it. We have all that we would possibly need to do such a thing. It just kind of does play off a lot of the previous stuff, which is these aspects to Pluto and Capricorn of how do we create and mutate the structure to a way that is more aligned for the common man, the common person. I would say that this eclipse, October 28th, is quite interesting for the financial markets because of Pluto square the nodes. Eclipses are with the nodes. Pluto being the dispositor of the sun, Mars is there. Saturn's in the mix, but Saturn's also getting ready to turn online and come direct and show us more of the mystical things that we can conjure up in our consciousness and how to stay dedicated. And it's a weird one because we have to stay kind of on it, but we also have to know when we're getting the call to let off it and to say, okay. And I would say just a lunar eclipse in general, and even full moon energy is trying to release something. So there's this, sort of physical attachment to things that bring us comfort. Venus in Virgo is not comfortable. Starting to trine Uranus though, which we're seeing, as we're filming this, Venus in Capricorn trine Uranus and Taurus. So now we're getting the other third of that trine. And again, I think that it is by still not losing ourselves in certain areas of life and staying in reality, and by still making tweaks and adjustments and trying things. It's like the more as a collective we just try something different as individuals and together or with people, the more we can harvest moving forward, and the more ideas and the more we're putting and like storing up for the long term of like where things are going. And Pluto's still in Capricorn, but it's about to come into Aquarius even more. And it will ingress one more time in 2024 into Capricorn. So there is a lot of this like into the future, to infinity and beyond. Wait, nope, get back to reality. This year has a little bit of both, but these are like, we still have to play. And I don't think that'll ever change, but it's like actually play, try, do, keep going in any way in life right now that feels like it's purifying your soul and bringing some kind of something to the collective. And if it is, and you find value in it, and you're noticing that other people find value in it, it's very, it's very special too.
I feel
So
like the messages keep sort of coming back to the same thing, which is when you are true to you, that's when everything moves forward and advances.
yeah, that's the year. Like that's
Mm.
really what I would say is the big thing about this year is on the deepest of levels, we're finding our the reason we came here. Whether
That's
we can spit it out and make sense of it or not, or just feel it, there's just something about, instead of like, I don't, I've heard so many people say, I don't want to be here anymore. I think you're going to hear less and less people say that, because there's something about this next year that's connecting us to why we are even here. Whether we like it or not, it's like, oh, that's right.
right. And
This
the
is
other thing,
important.
I always remind people, we all chose to be here at this moment in time. So as difficult as it is, before we came here, when we were making the decision to come to Earth for this incarnation, we had the conversations, we saw the blueprint. We may not remember those conversations, but we looked at it and knew this was when we were meant to come here to do the work for the spiritual growth for all of it. And so this is part of the reason why we can't give up.
Absolutely.
So the final astrological transit that I wanted to just touch on really briefly is one that we see several times every single year, and everybody talks about it. And even those who aren't into astrology know about this transit, Mercury retrograde. But the reason I wanted to touch on the final one of the year is it goes retrograde on December 13th. And it's retrograde through the holiday period, so through the Christmas holiday period and Hanukkah. And it goes direct on January 1st of 2024. I feel like that's Mercury just messing with us a little bit, just going, I'm doing it because I can. But how significant is that? Or is that me just putting too much on it because it's Mercury retrograde?
I mean, there's always a significance to everything, right? Like nothing happens by chance, and there's always significance. I always look at Mercury retrograde as like the little things.
Mm.
Um, I mean, I feel like my life is Mercury retrograde. So I feel like I have a hard time like relating to it in some ways. It's just like such a natural thing because we get 3 to 4 Mercury retrogrades a
Mm-hmm.
year. We just had 4 in 2022. And we just get so many of them that we just have to understand that if our mind doesn't stop and slow down and recalibrate to where it's trying to go or what part it's trying to understand, that it would like blow up. Like we would lose it. Like we would be institutionalized and be crazy. So the Mercury retrograde to me, and even in Capricorn, is especially about not focusing on just anything. Like we're also hyper focused on so many things that have nothing to do with us, that we have to restructure our mind to only focus on the important things, the things that really matter. Like Capricorn energy doesn't want to just mess around. It doesn't want to just go play games. It's not Gemini, it's not Leo, it's not these other places. It's serious. So it's like we do need to get serious with these retrogrades with Mercury and Capricorn. We've had a lot of them over the last few years. And I mean, I think that that's what a lot of this is about. And I think that it is significant because we are rewiring our brain as we come to the end of the year about so much of the relationship to society and to Pluto in Capricorn and this big attachment to how things are supposed to be done and the rules and the way, the order, that we are rewiring our mind in a way that is starting to see and identify so much more. And even it'll be in trine to Jupiter for that station. So there's just so much that can be understood, especially from an intuitive space. And I always say too that Mercury retrograde is, when it's retrograde, if you can disconnect from your analytical left brain and get into your right creative brain, you will do so much better. But we have to stop overthinking. That's where Mercury retrograde, we always, Mercury retrograde, got to overthink this. This isn't safe. I shouldn't get in a car. I shouldn't do that. We just amplify them to death, and we almost stress because it's the ruler of Virgo. Virgo rules stress. Capricorn deals with stress too. But like we got to stop doing that to ourselves too, and just be more in a creative place about what we can build, and how the time doesn't need to necessarily play a factor in it as we know it at the same time.
I almost feel it's a lesson in going with the flow. In
Of course.
2018, my dad, one of my sisters, and I, we did this big trip across the US, and it was during Mercury retrograde. And we spent so much of the time sitting on planes on tarmacs, not moving. For whatever reason, there was a technical difficulty. There was this, we would leave and then we would come back. Or there was one where we landed, we sat at the gate for ages. And then this was after an 8-hour flight delay before we could even leave. We land, we sit at the gate, and then there's an announcement. And I have it, I think I still have it in my Instagram story highlights. And we're sitting there and I'm talking to the camera, telling everybody what's going on because, you know, everybody cares so much. And right then the captain comes on the speaker and says, this air bridge is broken, so we have to go back, find another gate that we can go to. And my sister and I, and I think it was easier for us, we had nowhere to be at any particular time. So we were laughing through this whole thing and we kept just saying Mercury retrograde, Mercury retrograde. It's the same with appointments through that period as everybody starts to cancel and do all the things. I always just go, it's Mercury retrograde. There's nothing I can do. This is what happens. And I think for me, that's been the biggest lesson. And it's hard sometimes, you know, when your computer starts playing up or your phone's doing something weird, you do get to a point where you have to turn everything off and just walk away. And the ridiculous thing is you go back the next day and everything works perfectly, as if there was never an issue. But it's sometimes hard when you're trying to exist in a world where things need to be done.
Yep.
And the reason I brought up the travel was just because this will be through the holiday period. There will be so much travel going on. This is where people need to leave with more time than they think that they need, just to stop any, or
Yeah.
make it over any obstacles that present themselves, or to just not lose it at the poor person behind the counter if something goes wrong.
Yeah. I think that's one of the great tests of the Mercury retrograde is really just like hold your shit together, like stop stressing, stop over analyzing, stop trying to have things perfect. It's just a good reminder that it's not. And I think astrology humbles us in that way all the time. And yeah, travel, you know. I mean, it's one of those things like well, next year's so interesting for these relationship aspects. The holiday season is an interesting relationship that's been defined for us, man-made, that goes along with this Pluto finishing in Capricorn and square the nodes. Maybe there's just something about less travel taking place for that anyways. Maybe, or with a South Node in Libra, people could be more anxious than ever to get to the relationships with their family, with the people they love, and there could be delays. And we don't, we have there's a lot of questions out there about, we've seen a lot happen with airlines over the last year. Who knows what happens in another year? So much is happening so fast. It's hard to know exactly where the next year is going to end. We can kind of, in my opinion, look at the astrology and get somewhat of an idea, but like, man, that's another thing. Most people alive on this planet, planes have just been kind of a norm. Like, hop on a plane, go, and that's changed since 2020 with Jupiter, Pluto. It How much more is that going to change? What is that going to be like? Can you just do that? Is travel just far and wide going to work out? Maybe that's what people get stressed about when they're longing for the connection with family, with relationships that they love.
The
We could
reality
be in a
is,
war.
right
I don't
when
know. There's so many aspects that play into it. So I just whatever whatever happens by the time we get to December next year is like Saturn is gonna test us here in Pisces of like let go and let God, you know.
And it's all we can do. And it seems to be that's what a lot of the lessons are pointing to, in that it is about us not having control. We can control certain aspects of our life, and that's fine. And we need to work and do the things, but we also need to let go of so much. And I guess let go of the illusion that we have power over everything.
Yeah, I mean, we have the power of choice. Like we do
Hmm.
still have free will. So it's like when we get presented with choices and decisions that need to be made, it's just all about how we respond and how we act. Like flight got canceled or you get held up on a tarmac. We all have the choice to say, I'm going to throw a huge fit and ruin the rest of my day because this didn't go my way. Or, well, I can't control that pilot not wanting to fly or whatever the circumstance,
Mm,
like it was out of your control. And I think that that's where Pluto is very humbling right now, is there's so much about our reality that we don't have control over. And maybe we did know this before, but I think we're getting a big look at it, especially over the last few years. And now, as Pluto's finishing here, you only have control over your choices, your decisions, and that's based on your integrity and it's based on your soul. And some things just aren't worth getting so worked up about, upset over, and some things are. And that's going to be the test kind of too with these nodes, is like some things are worth getting fired up about in a constructive way. And some things are really not worth taking to court. You know what I'm saying? It's like,
absolutely.
are we really going to go through this long drawn out litigation for this little thing? So we just have to, it comes, there's a lot of choices that we're all going to have to make. And I do think that if, that's one thing that shows up is like if you can make the weird, unique, different choice that aligns with a high integrity of your soul that is trying to do whatever's best for sort of a natural law, it that you're doing the right thing and that things are going to actually work out in your favor, even though it seems like, oh, that could never work. And then there's like well, I have to keep doing this because I signed this contract, even though it's void. I'm scared to go off it. Like, you know, so just reactions in general, I think you'll see that how you react this year is extremely potent um, for where your journey's kind of going here. And that's the beauty of Jupiter in Aries right now. It's a time to identify with your truth. It's a time to start big things. It's a time to amplify your own knowledge, your wisdom, find what you really want to put your arrow towards. And it's a journey. So we're starting it, and there could be plenty of detours on the journey. But just because there was a detour, does that mean we're really going to turn around and go home upset, crying, and angry and throwing a fit? Or do we just say, no, I set my target on this destination and I have the integrity and the grit to keep going and to identify with choices that are really aligned with who I am?
Well, like you said, and that was all perfect. We may not have control over the astrology, we may not have control over the outside world, but we have control over ourselves and the way we react in every single situation. And that, I think, is where the most power comes from anyway.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's 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 funny when I really think about it. There's been so much like spiritual teaching, especially over the last, you could call it 10 years since 2012 that has come out, that I feel like came out at that time and even a little bit before, but it's really, caught fire since 2012 with Neptune in Pisces, is that we have discovered so much about the unseen and consciousness and how it all plays together, that this is the most potent time to actually put it to use, as we're, you know, in the end of the age of Pisces. I know we all wish we could see the age of Aquarius, and we very well might, you know, when all's said and done. But in another life, of course, we might get to come back. There's like rewards, right? Like, you did great in a interesting transition. So here you go.
Right?
That we have to really use a lot of that stuff. Neptune Jupiter meeting in Pisces in 2022. So much Pisces, Saturn in Pisces this year. You know, Pisces is spirituality. It is the connection to the universe, to God, to source, that we all start at the same place and we fractal out and we all go back and take our information up there, and that certain people need to gather different information, but you have the conscious choice to gather the information and create the life that you feel most called to now. Are you going to do it or not? And there's no right or wrong. That's the crazy thing too, is it's okay if you don't feel like that's right. It's not like, you know.
But we all came down here with different journeys. This is the whole point.
Exactly.
And what you were meant to do is different to what I'm meant to do. And what Fred, who lives next door, is meant to do is something different again. And there is a reason for all of this, whether it be our part in the collective or our own spiritual journey and growth for what we're meant to do, sort of moving forward. And it's all different. And it's about honoring, I guess, those differences.
Yes, it is. I think we have some great choices this year that can lead us to so much abundance and love and connection and things that we never thought were possible. And just as simple as it is to make those choices, it's just as simple to not. And I do think, you know, there's a lot to the stuff that Dolores Cannon has written about during her work with hypnotherapy and the split in the collective. And I think that we do see a pretty big divide and a gap. And, you know, if we keep making the same choices and keep going on one divide, if we're not happy on that, like, there's potential to get locked into that one. It'd be too far to jump at a certain point, you know. And maybe not. Like, God works in magical ways. Like, anybody can make a jump or do what they have to do at any time, but it does feel like the power to really find ourselves and act on that is this next year. And it's a big deal. Pluto square the nodes is a big deal, especially from an evolutionary standpoint. It's like the collective soul is redefining what the structure, the rules, and that breaks down to governments, institutions, financials. It's all getting redefined. We're drafting up new contracts, and every choice we make in our lives does vibrate out to the collective that is writing those contracts. So that's how important it is to make choices based on love this year. And Venus retrograde in Leo is a good reminder of that too.
Well, it sounds like we have quite a year ahead of us. I am so grateful that you took the time to sit with me and go through all of this. I mean, I think we've cracked the 2 hour mark. If we haven't, it's we haven't by a tiny little bit. But I'm so grateful, and I have enjoyed this conversation so much. We will touch base again probably mid-year and just sort of re-look at the final half of the year, and we might have a little more clarity, I guess, around some of the transits once we know how the first half of the year plays out, because then we have an idea of, I guess, the theme of the year. Do you agree that things sort of become a little more clear once we know the direction things are heading in, or is that just me?
No, I think that this is the year where this is the year where we see above the fog. this is, yeah, there can be so much clear. Aries is the identification. You see it, you identify it. There's no question. It is. I am. That is. That is what we have the ability to find this year. But there's going to be plenty of things trying to, again, say, no, no, no. Don't. Again, it's just, we can't listen to what others want or what a media source says and define our life by that any longer. Sure, some people will, and it's fine, and they could live a happy life. I'm not saying that life's doomed if you do these things, but I think you'll unlock a lot of your potential if you don't this year. And if you really do take the identification and see that, yeah, I am seeing clearly because of everything that I've learned, and I do not have to put myself in a purgatory state or locked away in some situationship that I don't want to be in.
It's that spiritual test.
It is. It is. It's Pluto in evolutionary astrology represents the soul. So, as a collective consciousness, our soul is recovering those steps of how to be in the right relationships so that it can really form these connections and move powerfully into where it's trying to go, wherever that may be. Because it's so funny, because the nodes move in mean, reverse, not mean, but reverse mean, reverse mean motion. That's what I meant to say. So, we go from Aries, I am, to North Node in Pisces. I thought that was a bunch of things. It's very funny. And then, so I do think we're in a time coming up next year where we're getting ready to see in 18 months of a very strong presence of ourself, so that we can intuitively sort of get into the future and trust that part of ourselves, because we're at a place where we can identify it. There's no saviors. Jesus isn't coming to save anybody. There's no president that's going to come back and save you. There's no official that's going to come in and change it. There's no world leader that's going to come in and make everything kumbaya. The only way to create peace and harmony in your life and balance is to create it yourself.
You are your own savior.
Only way. So that's, I don't know. I wish, I know we were going to do a prediction show, and I'll be honest, I was looking at the astrology, and I don't have any, super defined predictions. I honestly don't know exactly what might play out. So I wouldn't want to sit here and make something up. But I hope that at least what we talked about today and the advice that was talked about, or just how I saw things, I just hope that at least that for people can be enough to help them really do something potent and strong for themselves. That's going to be a big factor in the next 12 years, in the next 28 years, in the next 30 years. Like that's where we're, these are very long-term things, but they're at a starting point here too.
I almost think that it's better sometimes to not have the predictions, because when we make predictions, the picture that we get in our minds is very fixed, and we kind of hyper focus on that. Whereas I think when you talk about the energy, it leaves it open so people don't have a clear vision in their head, and they're not expecting a particular thing or event to play out. It's just understanding the energy so that it's easier to navigate the energies that are coming. I think it makes it less shocking when there are some of those jarring positions and alignments that we have. You're able to go, okay, I understand what this is. I understand that we're going to have it or be dealing with this energy for a week, a year, a month, whatever it may be, and then navigate through that without freaking out. And I often think that is more helpful than fixed predictions with fixed ideas and seeds planted.
Yeah, and I hope others, feel similarly, and that, yeah, it's a benefit. I hope someday I can make some amazing prediction that helps people and comes true, I suppose. But in the end, Pluto and Aquarius is going to be an interesting one. It Aquarius energy is so unpredictable. It's hard to get there. And even the cycles that we're in, Jupiter, Saturn, that met in Aquarius, these next 20 years, even, it's like, gosh, it's hard to make predictions with Aquarius stuff. Of course, there's other energy that we can use, but it's such a different, gosh, we're in such a time is like collapsing, and the spiral upwards of consciousness is so intense that to think that as a collective we're going to consciously go into sort of the same things as the past, like I don't know. Of course energy can kind of work out in the same way, but I don't know. I think that it's more beneficial, I guess, for people to use it in their own life, so that if there is some kind of cataclysmic or just wild event that takes place in the collective, at least they have the tools in their tool bag to navigate it, rather
Absolutely.
than to just say this will happen and, oh, maybe, you know.
Well, we all love what you do. Every time I do a video with you, it gets a huge reaction. So thank you for the work that you do. Of course, I will have the links to your website. So if people want to book readings, your YouTube, and everything else in between, so that people can follow you and find you. Thank you again.
Thank
To,
you.
to everybody watching, make sure to like, comment, and share this video. And of course, subscribe to both Bryan and myself. I know I speak on behalf of both of us, Bryan, when I wish everybody watching this video a wonderful 2023 and make it as magical as you possibly can.
Absolutely, you do.